Hi, in this video we'll cover how to select objects and to move, rotate, and scale them. Selecting and deselecting is probably the one thing you'll be doing more than anything else in Blender, so it's important to have a solid understanding of the selection tools in order to work quickly and efficiently. To select an object, right-click with your mouse and an orange highlight will appear to indicate that the object is selected. So here I've just right-clicked and selected our camera. Sure enough, it's highlighted in orange, meaning that the camera is selected. To select more than one object or to add to the selection, hold Shift on your keyboard, right-click an additional object, and now we've just added our cube to our selection. Both the camera and cube are highlighted in orange, meaning both items are selected at the same time. If I wanted to select all of the objects in our scene, I would press A on my keyboard. We have three objects in our scene, the camera, cube, and light. All three are highlighted in orange, meaning that all of them are selected. To deselect all of these objects at the same time, you would press Alt-A. And as you can see, the orange highlight has disappeared. Now, none of the objects are selected. We can also invert a selection. And to do that, I'm going to make sure that at least one item is selected. So here I'm going to select the camera. To invert a selection, you press Control-I on your keyboard. And what that does, as you can see, is it deselected the camera and selected everything else. If I invert the selection again by pressing Control-I, now our camera is back to being deselected and everything else is now deselected. We can also use several tools to select and deselect objects. You can box select, circle select, and lasso select objects. Some of these tools require using the middle mouse button, so if you don't have one, just head over to Edit, User Preferences, and under the Input tab, there's an option to emulate a 3-button mouse. If you check that off, you can use Alt left mouse button instead of the middle mouse button. Now I mentioned you can use box select, circle select, and lasso select. There are two ways in which you can access those tools: by using keyboard shortcuts, which is my preferred method, or you can use the toolbox over here on the left. First, I'm going to cover the keyboard shortcuts, and to access the box select tool, press B on your keyboard, left click with your mouse and drag a selection around an object. And as you can see, I've just selected the cube. To deselect with the box tool, press B once more, but instead of pressing the left mouse button, press the middle mouse button and drag to deselect. To access the circle tool, you press C on your keyboard, and a circular brush appears around your cursor. You can change the size of this brush by scrolling on your mouse wheel like so. And the circle tool operates differently from the box selection tool. So instead of drawing a circle selection around an object, you use the circle tool like a paintbrush. So if I left click with my mouse and paint around the workspace, you'll see that's how I select my objects. Now if I wanted to deselect with the circle tool, first I have to exit the circle tool by right-clicking with my mouse, and you can see the circular brush disappears from our cursor. And to activate the circle deselect tool, you press C on your keyboard, and instead of pressing the left mouse button, once again you press the middle mouse button to deselect. And so with the middle mouse button selected, I'm just going to paint my deselections. To exit the circle deselect tool, it's just like with the circle select tool. You right-click with your mouse and the circular brush disappears from our cursor, indicating that we have exited the circle deselect tool. To lasso select, you press Control on your keyboard, left click with your mouse and draw a lasso around the object you want to select. To deselect with the lasso tool, you press Control Shift, left click with your mouse and drag a selection around the object that you want to deselect. And that pretty much covers the keyboard shortcuts. You can, as I mentioned before, you can access these tools by using the toolbox. I'm just going to expand the toolbox here on the left, and our selection tool is the second option from the top. If you left click and hold with your mouse, you'll see a select box, select circle, and select lasso option. I'm just going to leave it on select box. And with the add function enabled, you can left click with your mouse and add to your selections. Next, if we choose the subtract option, we can subtract from a selection by left clicking and dragging, like so. We can create a new selection, and what that does is it deselects everything in the scene and only selects the object that you have selected. Difference functions like the invert function that we covered earlier. So if I draw a box around these two objects here, you'll see the camera becomes deselected, the box becomes selected. If I draw a box again around these two objects, now the camera is selected and the box is deselected. So very similar to the invert function keyboard shortcut that we covered earlier. Also, if you wanted to explore different select options, or if you wanted to assign shortcuts, you could go to the select menu over here in the upper left corner. You'll see all, select none, invert, some of these select options that we covered earlier, along with a bunch of different selection options, which we're not going to cover in this video, but you can always go back and explore if you want, along with a bunch of keyboard shortcuts as indicated over here on the right. To assign your own shortcut, right-click with your mouse. You can choose Change Shortcut, Remove Shortcut, or Assign Shortcut if a shortcut doesn't exist. And that pretty much covers the basic selection options within Blender. We can move, rotate, and scale objects in a couple of ways. My preferred method is, again, using keyboard shortcuts because it's faster, but we can also use the toolbox on the left here to do the same things. We'll cover both, but first I'll start off with the keyboard shortcuts. First, I'm going to select the cube by right-clicking it, and then to move the object, press G, which is short for grab, and then move your mouse around to move the cube along the view plane. And you can think of the view plane as an imaginary flat surface that is always perpendicular to our line of sight, similar to a picture plane for those of you familiar with perspective terminology. When we're done moving the object around, we can either left-click to confirm the change in position or right-click to cancel. First, I'm going to left-click to confirm, and as you can see, our object is in its new position. If I press G once again and move the object around, and then right-click to cancel, you see our object snapped back to its original position. In general, whenever you perform an action, left-click means to confirm the action, and right-click means cancel, especially where Blender is concerned. To move this object along a specific axis, press G to grab it, and then X to move it along the X-axis, or Y to move it along the Y-axis, or press Z to move it along the Z-axis. And then I'm just going to left-click to confirm the change. We can also, like most programs, undo or redo an action. So to undo, press Control Z to undo, press Control Shift Z to redo. To rotate the object, press R to rotate along the view plane. We can also rotate along a specific axis. So if we press R to rotate and then X, that'll rotate it along the X-axis, or if we press Y, it'll rotate along the Y-axis, and Z will rotate along the Z-axis. Just going to left-click to confirm the change. We can also rotate by a specified amount. So first press R, once again, for rotate, and then I'm going to constrain the rotation to the Z-axis, like so. And now enter the degree of rotation. For example, if we type in 45 degrees, that rotates our cube by 45 degrees. If I type in 90, that rotates the cube by 90 degrees along the Z-axis. So that's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to left-click to confirm. Lastly, to free rotate, press R twice, and then move the mouse around, and you can rotate the object in any direction, as you can see. Just going to left-click to confirm that rotation. To scale, press S, and then drag the mouse around to scale the object. To scale the object to along a specific axis, press S to scale again, and then X to scale it along the X-axis, Y to scale it along the Y-axis, and then Z to scale it along the Z-axis. I'm just going to press the left mouse button to confirm the scale action. Let me just move this object to the center by pressing G for grab. You can also remove any changes that you've made to location, rotation, and scale by pressing Alt-G to reset the location, Alt-R to reset the rotation, and Alt-S to reset the scale. And that covers the keyboard shortcuts. To use the toolbox to move, rotate, and scale, left-click the Transform tool in the toolbox, and a gizmo appears on our selected object. This is the Transform gizmo, which allows us to move, rotate, and scale just like we did with the shortcut keys. To move along the view plane, left-click this inner white circle, and then drag with your mouse to move along the view plane. You can also move along a specific axis by clicking on any of these colored arrows that you see. So if I left click on the red arrow, I can move along the x-axis, left click on the green arrow to move along the y-axis, and left click on the blue arrow to move along the z-axis. We can rotate by left clicking on this outer white circle to rotate along the view plane. We can rotate along the x-axis by left clicking the red circle to rotate along the x-axis, the green circle to rotate along the y-axis, and if we left click the blue circle, we can rotate along the z-axis. If we click the center, you can free rotate. Finally, we can scale by left clicking any of these colored boxes. So if I left click the red box, I can scale along the x-axis. Left click the green box to scale along the y-axis, and left click the blue box to scale along the z-axis. So as you can see, the Transform Gizmo is an all-in-one tool that allows you to move, rotate, and scale, but you have the option to use a separate tool for move, rotate, and scale if you just wanted to focus on one action. So as you can see in the toolbar on the left, we have a move tool, which allows us to just move the object. We have a rotate tool to rotate the object, and we have a scale tool to scale the object. And once again, if you wanted to remove any changes to rotation, location, scale, press Alt-G to reset the location, Alt-R to reset the rotation, and Alt-S to reset the scale. And once again, our object is back to its original state. And that covers the basics of selecting, moving, rotating, and scaling objects. I hope you found this useful, and I'll see you in the next video.